Finding a worm in your apple, a hole in your sock, or a scratch on your car is never a good start to the day. But trust us, things could be so much worse. A lot worse, because while a tiny worm in your apple is pretty gross, at least it's not a scary, screaming mummy frozen in agony, a human skull mounted on stakes, or an ancient brain mysteriously preserved for thousands of years. Some discoveries don't just ruin your day, they rattle your very sense of reality. From so-called vampires with iron stakes driven through their hearts to decapitated gladiators buried in eerie mass graves, here are the 15 most disturbing discoveries that will shake you to your core. And if you're afraid of scary, spooky things, well, we say only one thing. Just watch some Mr. Beast. All right, with that being said, let's start off with number 15, the vampires of Sozopol. Finding a skeleton is one thing. Finding a skeleton with an iron rod stabbed through its heart, that's when things get seriously creepy. Back in 2012, archaeologists digging near the seaside town of Sozopol, Bulgaria, uncovered something straight out of a horror movie: two 700-year-old skeletons with iron rods driven through their chests. Their crime? Well, allegedly being vampires. This practice wasn't just a scene from Dracula, it was a widespread fear across the Balkans. People believed that certain dudes could rise from their graves, so they made sure that wouldn't happen by nailing them to the ground. A year after the Sozopol find, yet another vampire was discovered in Perperikon, this time with a plowshare stabbed into his chest. And these weren't just isolated cases. To date, over 100 so-called vampire burials have been founded in Bulgaria, some dating back to the 1st century AD. While we'll never know exactly what these people did to earn their posthumous execution, some believe one of the Sozopol vampires may have been a feared pirate-turned-nobleman named Krivich, who later served as the town's mayor. If that's true, then even in death, his reputation lived on, just not in the way he would have hoped. Number 14. The Headless Gladiators of York. 15 years ago, archaeologists digging in the English city of York made a grisly discovery: a Roman-era cemetery filled with more than 80 decapitated skeletons. Over half of the bodies had been beheaded, some with their skulls tossed carelessly into graves, while others had their heads carefully placed on their chests. At first, researchers thought these could have been executed criminals or human sacrifices, but closer examination revealed deep battle scars, powerful upper bodies, and signs of intense physical training, all traits of trained fighters. Even more disturbing, one of the skeletons showed evidence of a bite from a large carnivore, possibly a lion or a bear. This led to a chilling conclusion: these weren't normal citizens. They were likely gladiators, warriors brought to Britain from all over the Roman Empire to entertain bloodthirsty crowds. DNA testing confirmed that many weren't even from Britain. Some came from as far as Syria. In life, they fought for survival in the arena. In death, they were tossed into mass graves. Number 13. The site of the Sand Creek Massacre. One of the darkest chapters in American history, the Sand Creek Massacre of 1864 was a brutal attack on a peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho encampment in Colorado. Under Colonel John Chivington, U.S. soldiers murdered between 100 and 150 people, mostly women and kids, in one of the most horrific war crimes of the era. The soldiers didn't just kill, they scalped the dead, mutilated bodies and took human remains as trophies. Chivington initially praised the massacre as a military victory, claiming he had crushed a dangerous enemy. But soon, witnesses, some of them his own men, spoke out, revealing the truth. A congressional investigation called the attack a deliberate, disgraceful slaughter, yet Chivington was never charged. For over a century, the massacre faded into history. It wasn't until 1999 that archaeologists located the true site of the killings, confirming the full scale of the horror. Today, it remains the only U.S. National Historic Site with massacre in its name. a permanent reminder of an atrocity too brutal to be forgotten. Number 12. Skulls on stakes in Sweden. In 2009, a routine construction project in Sweden turned into a macabre archaeological dig. While excavating near the Motala Ström River, researchers uncovered the first known instance of Mesolithic people mounting human skulls on stakes, a haunting discovery dating back 8,000 years. Among the remains were 10 skulls, including one from an infant, deliberately placed on a stone platform. Even stranger, their jawbones were missing, and 2 still had wooden stakes driven through them. Scattered around the site were fragments of additional stakes, suggesting many more had once been mounted in the same eerie fashion. The biggest mystery? Why these people did it? Were these the heads of enemies, displayed as trophies? Or was this an ancient funerary practice, some kind of ritual honoring the dead? Well, no one knows for sure. Number 11. The Heslington Brain. When archaeologists in York discovered an Iron Age skull in 2008, they assumed it was just another ancient relic. Then they cracked it open and found something no one expected. Inside was a 2,600-year-old brain, miraculously preserved. Dubbed the Heslington Brain, it belonged to a man in his mid-30s who had been hanged and then decapitated. Normally, soft tissue decomposes quickly, especially the brain, which is mostly water. But this brain defied nature. It had maintained a strange tofu-like texture for millennia. For years, scientists had no clue how it survived. Then, recent studies suggested an unknown acidic fluid seeped into the skull, halting decomposition. But what that fluid was and how it got there remains a mystery. The Heslington Brain isn't just rare, it's one of the best preserved ancient brains ever found. It's pretty terrifying. Number 10. The Whistling Terror Bullets. Slingshots may seem harmless today, but in Roman times, they were deadly weapons, and they came with a terrifying twist. In Scotland, archaeologists found 1,800-year-old Roman slingshot bullets that weren't just designed to kill. They were designed to scream. Some of these bullets had tiny holes drilled into them, a modification that puzzled researchers until one had a realization. His brother, an avid fisherman, noted that holes in lures create a whistling noise when cast. Sure enough, when tested, the bullets produced a piercing, high-pitched shriek as they flew through the air. The Romans had essentially weaponized sound to create panic, disorienting their enemies before the lethal impact. These ancient terror weapons prove that psychological warfare existed long before modern times. Imagine standing on a battlefield and hearing a chorus of whistling death hurtling toward you, not just deadly, but utterly terrifying. Number 9. The Scandalous Secrets of Littlemore Priory. For centuries, whispers of corruption and cruelty surrounded Littlemore Priory, a medieval convent in Oxfordshire, England. But in 2015, archaeologists found proof that something sinister happened there. The remains of 90 people, including a 500-year-old skeleton of a woman buried face down. This was a known punishment for suspected witches or women accused of living a sinful life. Even more disturbingly, the remains of an infant were placed between her legs. Historical records paint a chaotic picture of the priory. The prioress, Catherine Wells, was notorious for her scandalous behavior. She allegedly had a child with a priest, sold monastery treasures to raise money, and ruled with an iron fist. Nuns who crossed her were either beaten or locked in stocks for up to a month at a time. By 1517, church officials intervened, stripping Wells of her authority, but the corruption continued. In 1525, the priory was finally shut down. Was the face-down skeleton Wells herself, or another nun caught in the scandal? Well, only God knows. Number 8. The world's oldest cold case. If ancient crimes had a file cabinet, This would be case number 001. In 1984, archaeologists digging in Cima de los Huesos, or the Pit of Bones, in Spain's Atapuerca Mountains, uncovered a 430,000-year-old murder victim, the oldest known case of homicide. The evidence? A skull, broken into 52 pieces, belonging to a young adult of unknown gender. Once reassembled, cranium 17 revealed 2 identical fractures on the forehead. The injuries were consistent with a face-to-face attack, not an accident. Even more chilling, there were no signs of healing, meaning the blows were delivered moments before death, a prehistoric murder weapon in action. Who killed them? Why? No one knows. But the fact that the body was dumped in a deep cave shaft, surrounded by the remains of at least 28 other Neanderthals, raises a terrifying possibility. Could this have been an ancient crime scene, or even a burial site for more than one victim? Number 7. The Screaming Mummy. Mummies are eerie enough, but imagine unwrapping one and finding its face frozen in a silent, eternal scream. That's exactly what happened when Egyptologists uncovered Unknown Man E, better known as the Screaming Mummy, a shocking discovery from the Valley of the Kings. His mouth hung open in agony, and his body showed signs of an unusual mummification process. Unlike most Egyptian royals, he wasn't properly embalmed. His organs weren't removed, and his body was wrapped hastily in sheepskin, which was considered ritually impure. At first, scholars thought he had been buried alive or poisoned as punishment, possibly for plotting against his father, Pharaoh Ramesses III. Recent studies suggest he may have died violently, but the infamous scream is likely just a natural post-mortem effect. As the body decays, the jaw can drop open, giving the illusion of horror. Still, this screaming mummy is a mystery. Number 6. To serve man. Cannibalism in history isn't unheard of, but the case of Herxheim, Germany, is something else entirely. Dating back 7,000 years, this Neolithic site was home to the linear pottery culture, an early European farming society known for its pottery. What archaeologists didn't expect to find was evidence of mass cannibalism on an industrial scale. Inside 80 oval pits, researchers uncovered the dismembered and butchered remains of at least 500 people, their bones showing clear signs of being carved like livestock. The scale of it suggests this wasn't just survival cannibalism, it was ritualistic. And it gets even weirder. The number of remains suggests this was more than just a local practice. Some believe people traveled to Herxheim voluntarily, possibly for ritual sacrifices, while others theorize they were captured slaves, slaughtered, and eaten. Whatever the truth, one thing is clear. Herxheim was not a place you wanted to end up 7,000 years ago. Number 5. The Pet Cemetery of the Chiribaya Culture. In a 1,000-year-old cemetery south of Lima, Peruvian anthropologist Sonia Guillen made an amazing discovery. 43 dogs buried alongside their human owners. These weren't just strays or working animals, they were loved pets, cherished by the Chiribaya culture, which predated the Inca Empire. Each dog had its own grave, complete with treats and blankets, showing a deep emotional bond between humans and their canine companions. The Chiribaya people relied on these dogs to herd llamas, much like the modern Chiribaya shepherd breed, which closely resembles the ancient remains. Because the desert's dry climate naturally preserved the dogs' bodies, researchers are now trying to trace their genetic lineage and prove a direct connection between these ancient herders and their modern descendants. This discovery paints a touching picture. While civilizations may rise and fall, the love between humans and their dogs remains timeless. Number 4. Medieval maternity and the tragic coffin birth. About 1,300 years ago, a woman in the Italian town of Imola died just weeks before giving birth. When archaeologists unearthed her remains, they discovered something chilling. Her fetus had been pushed out post-mortem, a rare phenomenon known as coffin birth. This occurs when gases build up inside a decaying body, forcing the fetus through the birth canal. But while this was unsettling, the real mystery was a hole in the woman's skull, evidence of trepanation, an ancient form of skull surgery. Trepanation was performed across cultures for head injuries, headaches, and even spiritual healing. But in this case, researchers suspect she may have suffered from preeclampsia or eclampsia, pregnancy-related conditions that cause dangerously high blood pressure and seizures. Whether the procedure was a desperate attempt to save her life or a ritual to ward off evil spirits, the tragic fate of this mom and child was very heartbreaking. Number 3. The Terracotta Army. In 1974, laborers digging a well in China made one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of all time: a life-size terracotta soldier buried beneath the earth. What they didn't realize? There were thousands more. Excavations soon revealed an army of over 8,000 warriors, each uniquely sculpted, along with chariots, horses, dancers, and acrobats. This vast army was built as a mausoleum for China's first emperor, Qin Shi Huangdi, who ascended the throne in 246 BC and wanted to be protected, even in the afterlife. Though his actual tomb remains unexcavated due to concerns about its stability, legends suggest it contains rivers of mercury and unimaginable treasures. And let's be real, it's in China, so any and everything is possible. Number 2. Ata, tiny human or alien. In 2003, a 6-inch tall skeleton was discovered in Chile's Atacama Desert, so small and bizarre-looking that some believed it had to be an alien. The mummy, dubbed Ata, had an elongated skull and bone density resembling that of a 6-year-old, despite being no bigger than a pencil. For years, theories swirled about its extraterrestrial origins, but DNA analysis finally revealed the truth. Ata was human. She had indigenous Chilean ancestry with some European lineage, and suffered from 7 genetic mutations affecting bone growth, which likely caused severe dwarfism and skeletal malformations. Ata's condition is still not fully understood, but her tiny form remains one of the most fascinating and heartbreaking human remains ever found. While she wasn't an alien, her existence offers rare insight into genetic disorders that shaped human history, and the myths that sometimes arise from the unknown. Number 1. Injured zoo animals in ancient Egypt. 5,000 years ago, long before the pyramids were built, the wealthy elite of Hierakonpolis displayed their status in a unique way, by keeping exotic animals. Archaeologists discovered a burial site containing elephants, baboons, and even a hippopotamus, proving that Egypt's upper class had their own prehistoric zoos. But captivity came at a cost. Several animals' skeletons showed healed fractures, meaning they were injured while being captured or restrained. The hippo and multiple baboons likely struggled against ropes or cages, suffering broken bones in the process. Despite their wounds, these animals were kept alive long enough for their bones to heal, proving they were not just hunted, but deliberately kept in captivity. This discovery suggests that even in ancient Egypt, the concept of taming wild beasts for human joy was already good. If you've enjoyed this video, like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you very soon.